In 2015, archaeologists discovered bone fragments buried on Roanoke Island that don't belong to any known species in the region. DNA tests revealed something that completely changed our understanding of America's greatest colonial mystery. What happened to the 117 colonists who disappeared without a trace over 400 years ago? The answer is more disturbing than any theory ever proposed. Stay with me, because you'll never see history the same way again. To understand the shocking truth behind the mysterious bones found at Roanoke, we first need to go back to the year 1587. Imagine for a moment, you are among the first Europeans attempting to establish permanent life in the New World. There are no supermarkets, no hospitals, no communication with home. You're completely alone in an unknown land. This was exactly the reality faced by 117 brave English colonists who arrived at Roanoke Island in present-day North Carolina under the leadership of John White. Among them was Virginia Dare, who would become the first English child born on American soil. But this isn't a story of colonial success. It's a story that became the greatest unsolved mystery in American history. John White, who was both governor and Virginia Dare's grandfather, was forced to return to England in search of essential supplies for the colony's survival. What he didn't know was that the Anglo-Spanish War would prevent his return for 3 long years, 3 years that changed everything. When White finally managed to return in August 1590, what he found, or rather, what he didn't find, left him completely desperate. The colony had simply vanished. The houses were empty, supplies had disappeared, and there wasn't a single body or evidence of struggle. It was as if 117 people had simply materialized into nothing. The only clue left behind was the word Croatoan carved into a wooden post, and the letters CRO etched into a nearby tree. Croatoan was the name of a nearby island, inhabited by Native Americans who had relatively friendly relations with the colonists. But when White tried to investigate, violent storms prevented his arrival at the island, forcing him to return to England without answers. For over 400 years, this mystery has consumed historians, archaeologists, and conspiracy theorists. Theories emerged and disappeared like ghosts. Had the colonists been killed by hostile tribes? Had they died of starvation or disease? Had they integrated with local native populations? Or had something much more sinister happened? The truth is that until recently, we didn't have sufficient physical evidence to answer these questions. But that changed dramatically in 2015, when a revolutionary archaeological discovery was made on Roanoke Island itself, a discovery so disturbing that it completely changed our understanding not only of the colonists' fate, but of the very nature of what happened on that island centuries ago. But before revealing this shocking discovery, we need to understand why Roanoke was always more than just a lost colony. We need to dive into the legends, myths, and theories that made this place one of America's most haunted locations. There's something deeply disturbing about Roanoke Island that goes beyond the colonists' disappearance. Even before the Europeans' arrival, local native tribes had legends about this island, legends that perhaps should have served as a warning. The Croatoan Indians, ironically the same ones mentioned in the message left by the colonists, told stories about hungry spirits that inhabited certain parts of the island. They described creatures that were neither human nor animal, but something in between, beings that emerged from the earth during moonless nights to harvest those who ventured too far from the fires. Initially, historians dismissed these legends as mere tribal superstition, but when they began examining the accounts more carefully, disturbing patterns emerged. The descriptions of these creatures were consistent among different tribes that had no regular contact with each other. Even stranger, these legends always focused specifically on the area where the colonists established their settlement. During the centuries following the colony's disappearance, other strange events were documented in the region. In 1709, explorers reported finding strangely shaped bones on the island, but couldn't identify what species they belonged to. In 1834, a group of hunters disappeared for 3 days on the island. When found, they were disoriented and couldn't remember what had happened. They spoke obsessively about voices coming from underground. But perhaps the most disturbing incident occurred in 1887, when a scientific expedition led by Dr. Edmund Hartley was sent to conduct the first formal archaeological study of the island. The expedition was supposed to last 2 weeks. Hartley returned alone after 10 days in complete shock. His final notes, preserved in the University of Virginia archives, make for chilling reading. The sounds come from below, as if something were trying to dig its way up. We found the chambers. God forgive us, we found the chambers. Thompson and Williams went down first. They didn't come back. I can't write about what I saw down there. I'm leaving this place. May God have mercy on whoever comes after us. Dr. Hartley was committed to an asylum 3 months later and died there, still babbling about the hungry ones in the underground chambers. His superiors filed the report as conclusions of a disturbed mind and never authorized another official expedition to the island. Change of tone, more investigative. For decades, these stories were dismissed as local folklore or the result of overactive imaginations. But in 1998, something changed. Ground-penetrating radar technology became sophisticated enough to map underground structures without destructive excavation. And when researchers from the University of North Carolina conducted the first complete mapping of Roanoke Island's subsurface, they discovered something no one expected. There were empty spaces, many empty spaces. A complete network of underground chambers extended throughout the area where the colony had been established. Even more disturbing, these chambers appeared to be connected by tunnels that extended far beyond the limits of the ancient colony. Dramatic pause. But it was the density anomalies that really alarmed the researchers. At various points, the radar detected irregular masses in the chambers, masses that had approximately the density of organic material, but were organized in patterns that made no geological or biological sense. It was at this point that true scientific investigation of Roanoke finally began. And it was this investigation that led to the most shocking discovery of all: the unknown bones that changed everything. Epic transition. But to understand the true significance of this discovery, we first need to examine the physical evidence that has been carefully hidden from the public for nearly a decade. In May 2015, a joint team from Duke University and the University of North Carolina received authorization to conduct the first extensive archaeological excavation of Roanoke Island in over a century. Led by Dr. Sarah Chen, a respected bioarchaeologist, the expedition was supposed to last 6 weeks and aimed to locate definitive evidence of the lost colonists' fate. What they found in the first 2 weeks was relatively normal. European pottery fragments, corroded metal tools, remains of wooden structures, exactly the kind of evidence expected from a 16th century colonial settlement. But it was in the 3rd week, when they began excavating areas near the anomalies detected by radar, that everything changed. The first strange discovery was made by graduate student Marcus Rodriguez. At 3 meters deep, he found what he initially thought was a human skull. But when he brought the find to the surface for more detailed examination, it became clear that something was terribly wrong. The skull was approximately the right size to be human, but the shape was completely incorrect. The jaw was too elongated, with teeth that were simultaneously larger and more pointed than normal human teeth. Even more disturbing, there was evidence of deliberate modification. Small holes drilled in the temporal bone that didn't correspond to any known medical procedure. But this was just the beginning. In the following days, the team unearthed more and more bone fragments that defied classification. There were long bones that were structurally similar to human ones, but with extra joints that would allow impossible range of motion for normal human anatomy. There were vertebrae fused in patterns that suggested a spine capable of contorting in ways that would break a typical human skeleton. Dr. Chen, initially skeptical, began meticulously documenting each discovery. Her personal notes, which were only released after leaks in 2019, reveal her growing unease. Day 18. We found what appears to be a complete rib cage. The rib structure is incorrect. There are too many ribs, and they curve in a way that would create a chest cavity 40% larger than normal human. What would a being need so much lung space for? But it was the discovery of the bone room, as the team began calling it, that truly shook the foundations of everything we thought we knew about Roanoke. On the 23rd day of excavation, they accidentally broke through the ceiling of one of the underground chambers, detected by radar. What they found down there forced them to completely stop the excavation and immediately contact federal authorities. The chamber, measuring approximately 6 by 4 meters, contained the remains of at least 30 individuals. But these weren't normal human skeletons, nor were they skeletons of the anomalous beings they had found previously. These were something completely different and much more disturbing. The skeletons showed evidence of forced hybridization. Imagine normal human bones that had been deliberately broken and welded to bones from other creatures. Human femurs connected to tibias that were clearly of non-human origin. Human skulls with jaws that had been surgically removed and replaced with the elongated jaws of the unknown creatures. But most disturbing of all were signs that these modifications had been performed on living individuals. Bone growth patterns indicated that the victims had survived the modifications for considerable periods, some for months, possibly years, before finally succumbing. Among the remains, the team found fabric and leather fragments that were later identified as being of 16th century European origin. More specifically, the weaving patterns corresponded exactly to the clothing we know the Roanoke colonists wore. But perhaps the most shocking evidence was found carved into the chamber walls. In archaic English, barely legible due to time's corrosion, were messages left by the colonists themselves. Messages like, "They took us in the moonless nights," "The hungry ones call us down," and most disturbing of all, "They make something new of us. May God forgive us for what we are becoming." The discovery was immediately classified by the federal government, and the excavation team was forced to sign non-disclosure agreements under penalty of federal imprisonment. The site was sealed, and a 5-kilometer exclusion zone was established around the entire island. But not even the federal government could completely suppress the truth. And what they discovered when they analyzed this evidence more deeply was even more disturbing than the bones themselves. Despite government classification, some samples from the Roanoke discoveries reached independent laboratories through internal leaks. What scientists discovered when they performed advanced DNA analysis on the bone samples shocked even the most experienced researchers. Dr. Michael Harrison, a molecular geneticist at Johns Hopkins University, received an anonymous sample in September 2016. His initial analyses confirmed that part of the genetic material was undoubtedly human, specifically DNA that corresponded to 16th century European populations, but there were other genetic sequences present that didn't match any known species. Scientific but urgent tone. Initially, I thought it was sample contamination. Dr. Harrison said in a confidential interview that was leaked in 2018. But when I performed multiple independent tests, the results were consistent. There were DNA sequences that don't exist in any catalogued terrestrial species database. Even more disturbing was the discovery that these alien sequences were not just mixed with human DNA, they were integrated into it. It was as if something or someone had deliberately modified the colonists' genetic code, inserting genetic material of unknown origin into their chromosomes. But Dr. Harrison wasn't the only one to receive samples. A network of independent scientists around the world began collaborating secretly, sharing data and analyses. What emerged from their combined studies was a terrifying picture of biological experimentation that had occurred on Roanoke Island over 400 years ago. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a forensic genetics specialist at the University of Barcelona, managed to isolate and completely sequence some of the non-human sequences. Her findings were even more disturbing. These genetic sequences aren't random, she explained in a leaked document. They show clear signs of deliberate engineering. Someone or something was trying to create human hybrids with specific characteristics. The characteristics being introduced included bone density increased by 300%, making skeletons almost unbreakable. Modified muscle structures that would allow superhuman physical strength. Nervous system modifications that would drastically expand sensory capacity. Alterations in lung structure that would allow survival in low oxygen environments. But perhaps the most disturbing modification was neurological. Analysis of the modified skulls suggested that the hybrids' brains had been altered to eliminate certain higher cognitive functions, specifically those associated with individuality and free will, while amplifying other functions related to obedient behavior. Dramatic pause. In other words, someone was trying to create perfect soldiers, beings with superhuman strength and endurance, but without the ability to question orders or act independently. Dr. James Wright, a forensic anthropologist who examined the bone modification patterns, reached an even more disturbing conclusion. Based on the sophistication of the modifications and the understanding of genetics necessary to perform them, whoever conducted these experiments possessed scientific knowledge that is centuries ahead of what humans in the 16th century could have achieved. In fact, some of these techniques are beyond what we can do today. But who could have this knowledge? And why would they choose an isolated English colony for their experiments? The answers to these questions lead us to the most terrifying aspect of this entire discovery. Evidence that the Roanoke experiments weren't an isolated event, but part of a much larger program that may continue today. Analysis of sediments around the underground chambers revealed traces of elements that don't occur naturally on Earth. Specifically, isotopes of rare metals that can only be produced through processes, requiring technology far beyond anything that existed in the 16th century or even today. But perhaps the most shocking discovery of all came not from the bones or DNA, but from evidence that activity on Roanoke Island may never have really stopped. Evidence suggesting that those responsible for the experiments are still there, in the depths beneath the island, continuing their terrible work. In 2019, a former NASA employee leaked satellite images that the US government had kept classified for years. These images, captured by environmental monitoring satellites between 2015 and 2018, show something that should be impossible. Consistent thermal activity coming from the depths of Roanoke Island. The heat signatures indicate active underground structures far more extensive than anything detected by surface radar studies. Even more disturbing, the images show activity patterns that follow regular cycles, as if something in the depths were operating on specific schedules. Dr. Robert Chen, no relation to Dr. Sarah Chen from the archaeological expedition, worked for 12 years as a satellite image analyst for the National Security Agency. In 2020, he published a series of leaked documents that reveal the true scope of Roanoke's monitoring operation. Since 1962, we've maintained constant surveillance over Roanoke Island, he revealed. Not because it's a historical site, but because it's an active location of anomalous activity. The thermal patterns suggest an underground facility extending for kilometers, with multiple levels and what appear to be production or processing areas. But the most shocking revelations came from internal CIA documents that were leaked along with Dr. Chen's analyses. These documents, dating from 1963 to 2017, revealed that the US government not only knows about Roanoke's true nature, they have actively collaborated with those responsible for the experiments. One particularly disturbing memo, dated 1987, states, Project Croatoan continues producing promising results. Series C hybrid specimens show significant improvements in strength, endurance, and obedience compared to previous attempts. We recommend expansion of the program to include additional sites along the East Coast. Project Croatoan. The name cannot be coincidental. It's a direct reference to the message left by the lost colonists over 400 years ago. But what did this mean? The leaked documents suggest that those responsible for the original Roanoke experiments never left. They simply went underground, continuing their terrible work with the secret cooperation of the government. Tone of growing horror. Additional evidence comes from missing person reports in the region. Since 1960, more than 200 individuals have disappeared within a 50-kilometer radius of Roanoke Island under circumstances that defy explanation. All were young, healthy adults. All disappeared during new moon periods, and in many cases they were last seen walking toward the coast nearest to Roanoke. But perhaps the most disturbing evidence comes from leaked military reports about unidentified entity, sightings in the region. Reports describing humanoid creatures with superhuman strength, moving in coordinated groups and always returning to the Roanoke Island area before dawn. Final tone, dark but determined. One particularly detailed report from 2016 describes an encounter between a Coast Guard patrol and 3 of these entities. According to the report, the subjects measured approximately 2.1 meters tall, with extreme muscular build. They moved with perfect coordination as if sharing a collective mind. When confronted, they showed no fear or individual aggression, only obedience to some inaudible command. They were able to swim submerged for over 20 minutes before disappearing toward Roanoke Island. The shocking truth behind Roanoke Island isn't just that the lost colonists met a terrible fate. It's that this fate is being repeated decade after decade. With active cooperation from the highest authorities in our government, the experiments that began over 400 years ago never stopped. They simply expanded. And the unknown bones discovered in 2015, they're not relics of some historical horror. They're evidence of an ongoing program of human experimentation that may have produced hundreds, perhaps thousands of hybrids over the centuries. Those responsible for the original experiments, whoever they are still there in the depths beneath Roanoke, still capturing, still modifying, still creating their perfect soldiers. And our government doesn't just know about it, they're accomplices. The next time you hear about people mysteriously disappearing along the East Coast, remember Roanoke. Remember the lost colonists who left only the word Croatoan as a clue. Remember that this word wasn't just a location, it was a warning. And if you live anywhere near the North Carolina coast, pay special attention during new moons. Because if the leaked documents are correct, the collectors are still active and they still need new material for their experiments. The truth about Roanoke has been hidden for over 4 centuries. But now you know. The question is, what are we going to do with this information? Leave your theories in the comments about who's really conducting these experiments. And if you have any additional information about disappearances in the region, share it with us. Subscribe to the channel because next week we're investigating evidence that sites similar to Roanoke may exist in other parts of the world. Places where colonists and explorers disappeared under similar circumstances, leaving only cryptic clues behind. The truth is being revealed piece by piece, and together maybe we can finally expose those responsible for centuries of hidden horror. Until next time, if there is a next time.